All right, well, so our next presenter is going to be Fiona Carroll, and she'll be presenting the visual design of network data to enhance the cybersecurity awareness of the everyday internet users. The floor is yours, Fiona.
Lovely, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm hailing from South Wales today, sunny South Wales, I'll add, in the UK. This paper was co-written with Dr. Phil Legg from the University of the West of England, and also Bastian Bønkel, who is working with me at Cardiff Met University as an RA. So it's very much about improving public awareness of the risks to their personal online privacy and security when they exist and interact online. As we've all experienced with COVID-19, there's been a huge surge of online activity. We're doing absolutely everything online now, from work to school, shopping, banking, and even spending time with close family and friends online. So it's very busy, and we feel that it's important to make the everyday person more aware of what is actually happening when they exist and, as I say, interact. We have a feeling that people have started to care less if you compare it to the real world. Things like privacy and security have been pushed down the pecking order of value, really, when we look at things like, and I'll speak a bit later about convenience. Sorry, I know there's a bit of a lag. Yes, here we are. Hopefully I haven't pressed it too much, but essentially what we're going to look at in this short presentation is that balancing act between security and privacy. We're going to talk about very briefly the digital footprint. We're going to question, do companies value our privacy? We're going to talk about that big benefit of being online, convenience, and then kind of round it off by thinking about, really, do humans have to be the weak link? And in a lot of cybersecurity scenarios, they are described as the weak link, and we'll question, exactly as I said, do they have to be? Finishing off then with two studies which we ran and published in the paper. So privacy versus security and privacy. In the paper, we define both. We talk about security as that triad of confidentiality, integrity, availability. And then we talk about privacy really as a component within that, confidentiality, the ability to keep something secret, something that is secret and known by only intended parties. Also in the paper, off that, we talk about this thriving cybersecurity market, the development of new specialized technological protection, event and monitoring mechanisms for safe and secure cyberspace, things like SIEMs, ELK, Splunk, Squeal, ELSA, etc. And we balance that with the other side, I suppose the front end, where people are starting to care less. They're putting all their trust in these back-end monitoring systems, when really we feel that they need to start taking a bit more control of their own personal privacy. And COVID is a really good example when we see that the track and trace systems been issued. I know the keynote yesterday talked about over 30 countries pushing these systems out. And yes, it's a balance. You know, we need to collect information about this virus. We need to be able to understand, you know, how the virus works really. But on the other side, we need to safeguard, you know, our privacy, and of that privacy, our security. And privacy is something that we all value. I quite like a description that Mary Manjikan uses in her book Cybersecurity Ethics and Introduction, when she talks about this countering of transparency, efficiency, accountability, access on one side, and then this need for confidentiality, respect, empathy, regard for reputation, and forgiveness and forgetting. We as human beings do value our privacy, you know, and we value the need to protect our personal sphere of life, really. It's about cultivating, as you'll see in the text in this quotation, cultivating your circle and only letting certain people in. We value, in the real world, we value you know, having control over who knows what. But in the virtual world, things get, you know, a bit messy, and we're finding that there is a reduction in the amount of control we have. We need only look at, you know, Edward Snowden a few years back, when he talked about children will grow up without knowing privacy as we've known it. And also the whole Cambridge Analytica, where, you know, really, you know, what was done, we were used, people were used, their data, their privacy, it was used for various different causes. And without a doubt, we can say that, you know, business, we have the technologies now to gather all this data, to collect, store, and make sense of large quantities of data. And again, referring back to the keynote yesterday, it was quite interesting, this relationship between AI and data, this two-way relationship. But, you know, we're aware that the technologies exist, and we're also very aware as end users that businesses gather our personal data, and that personal data is a key asset to them. You know, that's, you know, without a doubt, the majority of us know this. And if we look, you know, even further, if you look and start to analyze, you know, the big five, like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple, you know, it's been widely known that they've been described as, well, their business models really been described as surveillance capitalism. So we know this happens. But I suppose the question is, around the clarity of our privacy, really. And GDPR came in 2018 and started to address some of these issues around clarity and agreement on privacy, particularly in you know, the business sectors. But I'm not quite sure if they've got it fully right, and I'm going to just quote Paul Romer, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, when he said, "There's a dishonesty about giving people something that's 18,000 words long and expecting them to read and understand it, and drawing a parallel with, you know, the cookies asking our permission." You know, so there is still issues around our use, or the use of our data, and particularly around agreement and our privacy. Now, Professor Luciano Floridi from the University of Oxford talks about digital footprints, and I'm guessing the audience are probably well familiar with the term, but for those that aren't familiar, it's basically a combination of our activities and behaviors online. Some people describe the digital footprint as that moment of memory. It's the truth about a person. And Professor Floridi talks about us owning our digital footprint, and that is very real. We are our digital footprints. And we do feel harmed if our data is taken, shared, or stored without our permission. And again, going back to this balancing act, yes, like we would in the real world, we would feel harmed, we would feel hurt, you know, if our data, our private data is taken and shared. And this balancing act then with our behaviors online, we tend to act online that in ways that doesn't help the cause around our privacy. If you look at how much data that we generate every day, from the moment we get up, one nice quotation that I use with my students is, what is the first thing, or what is the first thing you see in the morning? What is the first thing you do? Look at your phone and maybe answer a message, tweet, etc. So from the moment we get up in the morning to the moment we, you know, go to bed at night, we are generating data. And that data is voluntary and involuntary, you know, in many ways. And I suppose the question is around, do companies value our privacy? We are generating this data, we are giving this data, but do the companies, and again, quite a nice book that I got for Christmas actually, but summing up Google, you know, in 2019, and basically, you know, saying that, you know, privacy is not their problem. So if it's not the company's problems or problem, I really feel, as do the authors of this paper, it should be the end user's problem in many senses, or primarily in the sense that they need to take control of their own privacy. We are living in a very connected world, and rather than stepping back and addressing some of these issues, we have, particularly driven from the COVID-19 scenario, we have just jumped right into the deep end. And generally, it's because connected life brings a lot of benefits. During COVID, it allowed us to survive. It allowed us, a lot of us, to continue studying, a lot of us to keep our jobs. So survival is in there in these uncertain times, but also convenience. Disconnecting from the network would mean disconnecting from so much of society. But I feel that humans don't have to be the weak link. Quite a nice scenario here where we have Alice on one side cursing over her alphanumeric password, which she can't remember. Yes, humans aren't machines, and we cannot physically, well, very few, well, I suppose there is a small proportion, but the majority of us cannot remember totally random, you know, numbers or letters or combinations of both. Whilst on the other side of the table, we have Bob, who touches a screen with his fingers, and he's in. So biometrics, and using unique physical identifiers. Now, I know there's lots of ethical issues around biometrics, but the point I'm kind of drawing upon is that, you know, humans do have strengths. As I said, we're not machines. We are different. We have feelings and emotions, and we can express those feelings and emotions. And more importantly, we have the capability to understand situations and behave accordingly. And I think it's about tapping into, you know, the strengths, and making those strengths even stronger around securing and protecting our privacy and security. So just check on the time. Right, so I'm moving into the two studies that we documented in the paper. The first one was really, we were interested in probing people's thoughts and feelings around their online privacy. And, you know, the majority came back and said that they were clearly, they clearly did not think that their data was safe online. Now, these were computing students, so we would have expected something like this, but we were interested in probing them around what type of data was collected, and, you know, basically anything on personal data, habits, likes, wants, needs, contact relationships. Some described it as it was limitless, sorry. And then also it was quite interesting to see what was coming through in the data around, you know, what does Google think of me? And they started to put together profiles of how they felt Google, or, you know, as I mentioned, some of the other companies would have built on them. So things like music lover, tech and social entrepreneur, podcast and software engineer, sneakerhead. It was quite interesting to see how they started to think about the profiles that, again, were being generated on them, you know, whether it was voluntary or involuntary, they were being formed on their characters, which again brings lots of ethical questions with it. But I suppose coming out of that study, we were generally, we generally found that people, yes, were concerned about their privacy and security online. But off the back of that, they also didn't seem to have the desire to take control of it. They were aware there was issues, but they were doing nothing as such about it. And that was quite interesting. The second study then was very much around uncertainty, and looking at how we can design experiences. In this particular study, we looked at the DOS attack, but that could be anything from phishing attacks, which actually get through the back-end security, right through to some of the back-end vulnerabilities. But we were interested in visualizing uncertainty, because we felt that if we could visualize uncertain data, or uncertainties, or uncertain behaviors or abnormal behaviors to the end user, that might give them some extra motivation to take control and make decisions around their own privacy and security. And I just, off the back of uncertainty is commonly misunderstood to mean that data is not certain, but we're swinging that right around, and we're looking at the degree to which we are confident that this data is uncertain, that this data is is representing some abnormal behavior or you know, anything from, as I said, irregular traffic to fake news, if you want. So the second study, as you'll see from the visualizations, very simple visualizations around the DOS attack. This study was undertaken with network students, so they were very familiar with the context, if you want. But we were interested in the use of the visual variable and how that allowed them to make sense of what was happening. And what we found really, the more focus-based techniques like the blurring of the lines, and also the geometry-based techniques, the jaggedness and the sketchiness, we found them to be stronger in eliciting certain understandings from the user. For example, the blurred lines gave participants a feeling that some of the edges were stronger than the others, and the sketchiness and jagged visualizations, participants tended to feel that they were experiencing more menacing edges. And I think, I know I'm kind of coming close to the end of time. I think I'll sum up on that note. We have gone on. Bastian, as I introduced at the start, is currently working with us in Cardiff Met, and we are looking at more false information presented via, we're particularly looking at Facebook at the moment, and how you represent that false information to the end user. So tapping into effective cognitive processing and how you generate, you know, that initial alert to then trigger or influence the decisions they make or the actions they take around their own privacy and security. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for this great presentation. So we'll now get with questions. So wait for the questions to refresh. So I had a question about, like you mentioned a lot of data and privacy, but how do users reclaim their data in face of Google, Amazon, and such big companies? And should we give mechanisms to users to reclaim this data? And is this going to solve this privacy problem? What do you think?
Personally, yes. Like, as an end user, I would like to know what they think of me. You know, I would like to have an idea of the profiles they're building of me. So I think that is definitely one avenue that we need to explore in terms of, you know, transparency. You know, we need to know what data and how they're making sense of our data, because, you know, it mightn't be accurate. And, you know, we have many different faces when we go online. And I think, you know, they need to be accountable in certain ways. Like if they're making decisions off the profiles that they're creating on our usage and what we're entering, you know, data. So yes, I think spot on. We need, the end user needs that support. They need, you know, tools to allow them to understand what interactions are creating what profiles. So yeah.
All right, and we've got a question here for Tim. Have you considered using worldly maps with stakeholders to explore where they perceive different technologies to be in terms of user proximity, visibility, and maturity from genesis, origin to commodity?
I missed the start. What did it, word?
So, have you considered using worldly maps with stakeholders to explore where they perceive different technologies to be in terms of user proximity and visibility, maturity, from genesis, origin to commodity?
So like timelines, really, like
well,
experience maps.
I think Tim mentions also that like the proximity and visibility are plotted on a y-axis and the maturity is plotted on an x-axis, like a spatial mapping.
Okay. Yeah, no, we haven't considered that, but that sounds really exciting. So it's a 3D profile, really. I'm visualizing in my head of the user as they're online.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
So
Tim, we haven't considered that, but if you're game for exploring that with us, we'd be more than happy to collaborate.
So Tim is mentioning as this is a situational awareness technique, and I'm pretty sure that you guys can take that discussion offline. And he mentioned that he's happy to collaborate.
Brilliant.
And I think one last question would be, so in your second experiments, what did you feel, or what visual cues worked best, and do you have any reason for these visual cues to work as well as they did?
Yeah, we tended to find that the focus space, the blurring, and also the kind of noise-like visual variables. Now, we were hoping to run, Bastian has taken the work further, and we were hoping to do some studies with EEG technologies to pick up people's initial reaction to these, particularly around what's threatening and what's non-threatening. But unfortunately, the project has had to take, I suppose, the scenic route, let's put it that way, as a result of COVID and social distancing that EEG won't afford. But yeah, a lot of the work that we've taken now into more the false, identifying false information is around that noise, and that is definitely when any end user sees noise on a digital device, it alerts them that something's not quite right, and we're pushing that and exploring that further.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Fiona, for this talk. We will now have a 60-minute break, and then we will come back for session 2, still track 4, human factors and visual analytics, for 2 more talks this afternoon. So thank you, everybody, for your participation. And again, thank you for our great speakers this morning.